Definitely a big thing. It's just like, it's for one thing, seeing that you're not alone, you know? I mean, it's just like, this isn't only you that's, dealing with the situation. And I met some really good people out here that had a lot of hardship fall on them and had to, not by their own hands, they done everything right, and it just wasn't in the cards for them. And, it wears on you really, really bad, mentally, physically, the weather.
That narrow look when you're on the pain medication, it just like basically becomes more of your life than you could ever imagine. I mean, I was put on so much medication that my doctor needs his ass kicked because I wasn't one for taking medication anyway. I never understood how it worked. I was never told how it worked. First doctor, the pain was so bad that there wasn't a day go by. I'm a pretty religious person, as far as my belief in Christianity and God and stuff, but there wasn't a day go by that I didn't pray, and I thank God for what He gave me, but I didn't ask for any more, I'm just like, if you want to end it today, I could be okay with it. It was horrible. But I said, heroin. I said, no. I said, I'm not putting this shit in me. I said, I don't know how much you use anyway, if I even wanted to, and how to even go about doing it. And I'm not spending no more money on none of this shit. At that point, I was ready to die. I welcomed it. But he said, listen, man, he said, you think them pills you did helped like this? He said, I'm telling you, he said, this is going to take your pain completely away, your sickness, your diarrhea, vomiting, all that. He said, in minutes. And honestly, I don't know why I did it. I just finally talked him into doing it. I did it, man, he was right. I was like, oh my God. For the first time in I don't know how many years, my pain was completely gone. That's what bothers me the most. It's just something that doesn't walk, talk, or breathe, have a soul, and it can take that much control over you, and it just blows me away. If his family wants to see him, they better get here within hours because he's not going to be here by morning. Well, she had to call my mom and tell my mom this shit, and my mom freaked. Her and my sisters all come out and out there, and I remember, I don't know, I guess, honestly, I guess I died because I can remember hearing them talking, and I remember following them outside. Let me see, what I'd really done, what they'd done to my family. Pretty wild experience because I told my mom and then my sister about I seen Mom break down and just fall to the ground, cry, and kills me. I can't hardly talk about it or think about it. I always said that, I would tell them every time, ain't nobody gonna pay for this but me. And so I came in this world alone. I'll leave it on my own by myself. What I do, I'm gonna pay for it. Nobody else is gonna pay for it, but that's not true. An addict's way as a cop out to get them off your back and shut them up because nobody wants to hear that, and especially an addict, It does affect the people around you and the people, especially the people who love you and care about you, They don't want to see you like that, I see, man, I've passed homeless people before myself and jumped to conclusion or judged too quick, and I was wrong for doing that. Very, very wrong. I just wish that people would stop and take the time to realize that just how fortunate they are to have the things they have, because anything at any time can happen and take everything that they ever had completely away from them, and they can lose their families and anything that puts you out here on the street. Anything good, and nothing's guaranteed here in life like this. Nothing's guaranteed. It could be here today and gone tomorrow.
Someone about possibly getting housing for the winter.
There it goes.
It's supposed to be somebody's helping us in through the mission now to call about apartments and the funding and all that they've taken care of, and just a matter of being accepted, our application being accepted.
What
yeah,
kind of
we got
housing would that be?
It's an apartment.
An apartment, okay.
Welcome to Nowhere. I'm your host, Keegan Otwell. These clips you've heard playing are from Donny's story, pieces of interviews done over a period of a few months during which he was incredibly candid and insightful. You heard him speak about how nothing is guaranteed and how he was working towards getting housing this past winter. Well, nothing is guaranteed because Donny's story came to an end on the night of January 21st when he froze to death. That housing that he was talking about getting, he was 2 days away from it. Nothing is guaranteed. 2 days. I got to know Donny through our countless meetings, and you can imagine how I felt learning this. I was at work at the time. I was sad, obviously, and I hadn't learned yet just how close he had been to getting housing. And yeah, I was sad. And then I was angry. I imagined in my head Donny freezing to death outside, a mere 5 blocks away from my own house. I pictured all the other houses surrounding the area, the people in them, all of us protected against the winter elements. Why were we allowed to have that? And Donny wasn't. I imagined life in all those homes going on as mine had, completely unaware of a life being lost. So, when it comes down to it, this is a human being we're talking about. This is a person's life, and he's not the only one that's been affected this recently, just in my own community. So I talked to Pastor Steve from the Mission, which is a local religious nonprofit in my town that offers an assortment of services, from showers to getting IDs for people, to Bible study, to a rapid housing program, which is the name for the program that Donny was part of. He had a caseworker through that program who was helping him and his fiance get housing. And so next for you guys, I'm going to play this interview with the pastor, and we talk some about the broader context of what the mission does in my local community, and more importantly and to the point, about the memorial and funeral services that he provides for members of the homeless community. And when I talked to him, he had, so it was a couple weeks after Donny had passed away that I found out, maybe almost a month later. And, even since then, someone else had died. Corey Beebe died in an abandoned house fire in town of smoke inhalation, trying to survive in temperatures that were below freezing. So here are 2 deaths in a short period of time directly related to being homeless, to not having housing. And the thing is that when I talk to Pastor Steve, as you'll hear him talk about, there's been 4 deaths within the homeless community already this year that he knows of. And, this entire situation has got me wondering just how many people are dying, and you see all kinds of statistics, places. These are already people that have fell through the cracks. And how do we know that any of these statistics about the life expectancy of homeless people, or how many people are actually dying out there, if they're true? Because in my own community, there's another homeless shelter who he said does a roll call at the end of every year, like a death roll call for all the people within their community that have passed away. And he said last year, he saw it was around 24 names. So that's not including the 13 memorial services he performed through the mission for people. So in my local community, I believe the number of people experiencing homelessness was around, this is on the higher end, I'll look up the exact number, but it was around 600 people the last time they did a census. And so if we're in this city and we have, you know, a group of people experiencing homelessness who are below 1,000, and there are, that would make about, what would it be, 30, 40, like 40 deaths in 1 year of people experiencing homelessness. And, you know, obviously we get into the territory where a lot of these are overdoses, and there can be all kinds of arguments about that and how maybe that would have happened anyways. What does them being homeless have to do with them dying of an overdose, etc., etc.? But you know, when you're trying to survive on the street, using can become a part of that survival. You know, they call it self-medication for a reason. And a lot of times these people who've fallen through the cracks, who have, you know, not really gotten anything from so-called society or linked up with resources, or, you know, they're trying to get linked up with resources, but, you know, there's a lack of housing, there's a lack of resources. The programs can only do so much. And like with this situation with Donny, it's like I'm not even mad at the system there is to help people, because he was being helped. But when it comes down to it, like, there has to be money put into making more housing available, or the rest of it just doesn't add up. As I'm recording this right now, I have not yet interviewed his fiance, but I am going to try to find her tomorrow and see if I can talk to her. Anyway, you know, I'm not gonna go on forever about this. You heard Donny at the beginning of this episode. If you haven't heard that full episode, you know, just go back and listen to it. Just know that this is a person who existed and mattered and still does, you know? All right, here we go. Here's that interview with Pastor Steve. All right. I appreciate you meeting with me. I guess just like, what drew you to working at the mission, I guess, would be my first question. And, well, I guess introduce yourself.
So my name is Pastor Steve, and I've been here at the Washington Mission now for 6 years. I also volunteered for years, so I've been here for 7 years altogether. Wow. I was going through what's called church planning assessments, and I learned that I could plan a church. At the end of my church planning assessments, the guys had said that we feel like you really need to go somewhere where there's a lot of addicts and alcoholics, that we can tell that's where your heart is. So that's what we're going to recommend. At that time, I was also involved in a program called Celebrate Recovery. And I had met the director here at that time, Dave, through Businessmen in Christ. He asked me if I would be willing to come down here and start doing some Celebrate Recovery stuff. At the end of that year, he asked me, he said, Steve, I can see your heart for the people down here. I see that you really have a heart for them. So the reason why I do is I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict myself. I've been sober now for 10 years. I used to live the streets in Iowa City and in the Quad Cities. And so I know what it's like to dig through the dumpsters. I know what it's like to fly the signs. I did all the same stuff that these guys do. And so when he offered me to become the chaplain down here, I accepted it. But I'm also a pastor at First Baptist Church in Greenview, Illinois. So that's how I got the title pastor as well as chaplain. So that's what kind of brought me here.
I guess on like what's your like day-to-day basis like here? What does that look like for you?
So we open our doors at 7:30. Before we open our doors, so a lot of us will come in at 7 o'clock. We'll set up our coffee. At 7:20, we'll get together as a team, which will be volunteers, National ABLE, and staff members, and then we will pray before we open the doors. We want to make sure that we have the Spirit of God over us before we open our doors, because we know we never know what the day is going to bring.
Yeah.
And so we want to start out that way. And so we'll pray, and then after we pray, then I will go out front, and then I will pray with the folks as well before I open the doors. So at 7:30 we will open the doors. The folks will come in. They'll go to the kitchen. We'll have noodles that we give out and oatmeal. Anything that people might bring and drop off to us. So we'll serve whatever people are willing to give to us. And so we'll do that. I also do at 9 o'clock, I do recovery meetings on Mondays and Tuesdays, which is held here in my office that we are sitting in now. I know the people can't see it, but
Yeah.
but we will usually have 8 to 15 people that will come in for the recovery meeting. So I want to be here for anybody who struggles with anything. And so we open it up to all kinds. On Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, we do a Bible study. We actually do those in the chapel. We also have showers and laundry back here. So people will come in the mornings normally, and they'll go back and they'll sign up for showers. And so they can do a shower every other day, and they can bring in laundry as well, and they can do laundry once a week. So we have laundry services as well. They also have a clothing room, so women shop on Tuesdays and men shop on Thursdays. We also have what we call Life's Healing Choices that I do in here, which is about trying to make right choices in life instead of wrong choices. I know in my own life, I've made some pretty bad choices in my life, but I've started making better choices. And so there's a way to make right choices, so we try to help them do that as well. We have life skill classes, which is what's going on right now. They are on every Wednesday at 12:30. Basically anything from how to take care of a cut to basic hygiene to just how to even deal with a landlord, because some of these guys don't know how to handle landlords.
Totally.
So all that kind of stuff. And then I also do anger management classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. What we have found is there's a lot of people who are out here and get in trouble. And then part of their sentence is to do anger management classes. Well, anger management classes cost anywhere between $350 and $500.
Oh, wow.
We decided that if we could do them here and give them for free, would be a great service to our community members.
Nice.
So it's recommended by most judges. There's only been a couple that haven't. Then we have a new side of our building over there where we have started, we have a case manager. The case manager does what we call rapid housing. So it's when people come in, they meet certain qualifications, which means they haven't been in house or anything for a certain amount of time, and they can go on this program called rapid housing that helps them to get into housing. We also do birth certificates, IDs, and social security cards. And a lot of people don't realize just how much stuff goes on here at the mission. But what was happening was people were coming and getting those, and then we'd have to send them somewhere else to go get notarized. And so we decided that it would be beneficial for us to have a notary here. So I went ahead and took notary classes, so I am now a notary in Republic as well. So if somebody comes in here and they need an ID, I can notarize it, and they can go right straight to the driver's license place and get their temporary ID. So that's been very beneficial for them as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that goes on here.
So was Donnie getting housing through the rapid housing
program
then? Okay.
He was.
So is that program kind of like a housing first approach? I know programs are different all over the place, but some programs have people come in and complete, they want them to go to treatment before they get housing, or they want them to do rapid housing. Sounds more like it might get people housed and then we'll deal with that kind of stuff.
So I don't know a whole about the rapid housing because I'm not the case manager. I know that they work with Heartland Criterium on it and Heartland House on it. There's different qualifications on it depending on the length that you've been homeless, your income, or can you afford anything at all. If you're on disability, it moves you up a little bit because they know that you can afford subsidized housing. So you might get into Sagamon Towers where your rent might be $200. So they work with landlords to try to find people that can do low income housing.
That's interesting. So, because I know there's an apartment somewhere they started just for, I think it's through Helping Hands, and they started a apartment just for getting people into housing. Did you have many interactions with Donnie at all? I mean, I know you interact with a lot of people, but I'm just curious if...
Yes. Yeah. So Donnie was what was one of our loners because he dealt with PSTD, and so he didn't like to be around the big crowds. But him and his girlfriend would come in, and so he would always come in. He would always roll himself back to the back, and he would always want something, and just like most of the guys do.
Yeah.
But then he would get it, and then he would leave. But I would always joke around with him. You know, I joke around like that. He always had a smile on his face. I love Donny. You know, there's people that come into the mission that we know because they're a hard case. There's others that come into the mission and we know because they're just nice guys, and we don't have to worry about them. So they're just part of our community, but they're very well behaved. They're very respectful.
Yeah.
You can joke around with them. They'll joke back around with you. You don't have to worry about them threatening you or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so Donny was one of those kind of guys. I mean, he was a really great guy. He really was.
Yeah, I definitely had that impression meeting him. I don't know, the first time I met him just seemed like a very down-to-earth, very calm, collected kind of guy.
Yes.
So you've already done 2 services. Those happen here. So the service you did for Donny, is that like separate than what his family would put on somewhere else?
So it's really up to the families themselves.
Okay.
So I've done where it's been both. So I've had where the family doesn't have any money, and so they've asked for me to do the service here. I've had when they've asked me to just do a graveyard site service before, so I've actually gone to just the cemetery and done it at the graveyard with just the family and not our community members.
Yeah.
Then I've had others where the family wanted to have something for our community members because they knew the importance for the closure for our community members, but the family also wanted to do something just privately for their family. So it can go either way. It's really up to the family. So my job as the pastor here is I want to do whatever is best for the family for closure. I want our people here to have closure, but I mainly want the family to have closure because they're the ones that lost their loved one. Yes, we all love the person, and I'm going to do something even if the family, I want to say I won't do something the family asks me not to. And I've only had once where the family has asked me not to do something.
Yeah.
Most of the time I will call the family up and ask the family, is it okay if we honor such and such person? And they will say, yeah, that's fine, go ahead, we don't mind.
Yeah.
Then that's how the family gets involved, and then they'll decide if they want to come or not. If they decide that they don't, and we will get a picture of the person, and we'll have a picture up there for the ceremony, and we'll get flowers and stuff. So the mission will do the stuff to make it as much as a normal funeral as we possibly can.
So I remember the first time we met, you mentioned that you did like 9 funerals last year, or 9 here.
Last year, I think we had 13.
13, wow.
And there's one, I love this job, but one of the hard parts about this job is the deaths that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
And it helps keep me humble because I realized that in my alcohol and drug addiction that I could have easily been one of those folks. And to the Lord's grace, I was not. But there's people who are dying out there in their addictions all the time. And those are just people that I can think of. There's probably been more. Helping Hands does a funeral call or a death roll call, and I want to say they said that last year they read off like 24 names of people that they had lost. I know that this year so far we've lost 4, and this
year so far.
Yes, and so we have a lot of death going on, and as the pastor here, I want people to know that people still love them. So many people out here on these streets feel like nobody cares about them, nobody loves them, nobody wants them around. Society looks at them as outcasts. They get looked down on all the time. And so they just don't have no hope. And they just feel like, hey, there's no reason for me to care about anything. And so they just get high and they get drugged up and they don't care. I want them to know that we do care, that there's people out here that do think you're worthy, that do think that you can have a successful life, and we want to help you to have that. In any way we can do that, we are going to go to bat for you. We will fight for you, and we will do everything in our power to get you from where you're at to get you where you want to be. You don't have to fight it alone. And that's one of the most important things, is to let them know that they do not have to fight this alone. They have people in their corner. Sorry, I get a little bit emotional about this
Oh,
stuff.
no, you're fine. I mean, I can only imagine. I just can't imagine what it's like being the person to directly deal with all of that and kind of bring it to the community for closure. I think one of the things that kind of blows me away is like, and what really gets to me, I mean, the addiction death gets to me because I've been there before. I've overdosed a lot of times. I could be dead too. There's no reason why I'm here and someone else isn't, or by the grace of God, like
Correct.
you said.
Yes.
But like with Donny and the having housing so close, and then it being like saying that had to do with the weather and how cold it was, and it seemed like Corey, I'm assuming he was trying to survive below freezing weather and started a fire in the abandoned house or something, and it got out of hand, because that's usually how those happen. But it's so frustrating to see, like the way I thought of it when I learned about it is like my house is just like 3 blocks down the road. So it's like just the fact that, he was out here and surrounded by people in warm houses,
Mm-hmm.
It just makes no sense to me at all, like why that's still happening. Which I know it's like, there's stuff that's, like, you guys were helping him. He was going to get housing, and I don't know, it's very frustrating too. And I don't think, like, I've looked back into the past at a lot of reporting around here towards homelessness to try to, like, learn and stuff. And there's not a lot of, like, stuff about people who have passed away. There's a lot of stuff like, these are the new programs we're having, these are the people that are going to be working together, and where the funding is going, but you don't hear a lot about like the actual toll that it takes on people in this community.
I think part of that is, and I try not to speak negatively about anything, I try not to, but it seems like when it comes to homelessness, when a death happens, they really try to push it under the table. It's like they don't want people to know about it. Donny, a prime example, was getting ready to, within a day or 2 at the most, I can't remember if it was a day or 2, he was going to be housed. I mean, he was literally that close. And to go from being in a tent and then getting high, and they called it the nod. So he nodded. Nobody knew anything about it, and it was cold, and he ended up freezing. It's so heartbreaking to know that he was there. An ambulance had came 3 hours earlier to check on them. Wow. And he had refused because he was coherent. And when you're coherent and you can answer the questions, they won't take you. And so then he went. I mean, they left, and so 3 hours later, he's back in the hospital, and he freezes. And then we have the guy who dies from smoke inhalation, but you're right, that's exactly what they do. These guys will come in just covered pure in black because it's so cold outside that they go into these abandoned houses or apartments or whatever they can find, and they'll burn up everything that's in it because they're trying not to freeze to death. Yeah. But unfortunately with that, sometimes the places catch on fire and they're sleeping, and if they've been drinking or drugging during the night, well, they don't wake up. Right. And the smoke gets them a lot of times before the fire does. So at least they don't burn to death. They usually die from the smoke inhalation. But it's still a death, and it's usually an unnecessary death, and it's usually from young people. Corey was 36 years old. Yeah. When you see it with these really young people, that's what really makes it really hard. I mean, Donny was at least a little bit older, but still, he had a lot of life ahead of him. Right. Yeah. And he was looking so forward to getting housed. I mean, it was like he had been fighting for that, and it was finally gonna happen. Yeah. And then he was gone, and it was probably one of the hardest ones here as a staff for the mission for us. I mean, all the deaths are hard, don't get me wrong. Right. They're all hard, but to know that he was so close to being off these streets, and then to have the streets take him, it's tough.
I don't know. I just, like, something I've seen in other cities around the country, places where even like when I was out in Oregon in Medford, which is like, it doesn't get that cold there during the winter, but they have warming centers where people can go at night. Do we have anything like that that's outside here where people can go to get warm if they need to?
We do. So the police station, they have the lobby, so you can go over to the police station, and you can't lay down there though. You have to stay sitting up in the chairs. So you can go over to the police station. There was somewhere else, and I can't think of where it is right at the moment. But there was a couple different places that people could go to. The problem is that a lot of times they're the kind of places that people don't want to go to.
Yeah,
you know,
the police station.
Like the police station, right. You know, if you're somebody who deals with alcohol and drugs, you're usually not too friendly with the cops. And so you don't want to be around the police. And so they will try to get what we call campsites together, because they figure if the more they can get together, the warmer they can be. But even then, so like an instance with Donnie's campsite that they had, 2 or 3 days after he passed, then his campsite caught on fire and burnt down, because once he passed and everything moved on, other people took over his campsite. They started burning stuff down there and caught the campsite on fire. Donnie and them were much more careful and really tried to take care of the campsite, but not all people are that way. Yeah. So they'll try to still keep warm that way, but they rather have that little bit of what they consider their freedom and not think about the cold than go to a place where they think that they're going to be arrested.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a double standard. There's not enough places for them to go for warming, but it's also sometimes their decisions too. Sometimes they don't make wise decisions either. I mean,
it's one of those things.
Me and you didn't either, right?
Yeah. Especially with the kind of, I was homeless for a few years, but I think I was in below freezing weather maybe a couple times, because I always kind of traveled through the South in the winter.
Right.
And that was like when I was interviewing Donnie, it was getting into like October, and I was like, man, I can't imagine having to be out here when it gets this cold, and just like, especially with the snow and everything. And
not only do we do the deaths, but then we deal with the frostbites too. I mean, we've had people come in here and lost their toe. We had one guy who literally cut his own toe off.
Jeez.
Because he didn't have any kind of insurance and stuff. He wouldn't go to the hospital. He said he couldn't feel anything in his feet anyway, so he literally took a knife and cut his own toe off.
Oh my God.
And so that's another thing that we deal down here with a lot of times is frostbite.
Yeah. If you could like see more services or change to services that exist, like what would you like to see happen in Springfield?
One of the things that I appreciate about what's even gone in here at the Mission. So I've been here at the Mission, like I said, for 6 years.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of changes that has happened at the Mission since I've been here. All the programs and stuff that I was talking about earlier with you, we never used to do any of that kind of stuff. And so seeing all this stuff that we're trying to do to help people is great. But what we of course need more housing. One of the biggest problems is for sex offenders. And I understand why people have a problem with sex offenders. I mean, but some of these guys have served their time and they really are remorseful. Now, I'm not going to say that every one of them is, because that just wouldn't be logical to say that. But a lot of times they are. But there's so many places that they can't go, so many landlords that won't rent to them. And so even if we get them into rapid housing, they can't go anywhere because there's nowhere to put them up. And so come cold and stuff like that, unless they come up with the program, which Springfield has a couple times, where they will put up in hotel rooms sometimes to try to have somewhere for them to go, because they can't go out to the shelter either. They can't go out to Helping Hands, because if you're on the sex offenders list, you can't stay there either.
Oh, wow.
And so we need places for people for that, and then we need people who they're first coming out of prisons and stuff to be able to connect. And so we're trying to figure out a way to, one of the things is that we don't want to be a service that's fighting against the other services in Springfield.
Yeah.
We want to be a service that works with the other services, because it's not about us and what we're doing, it's about the folks that are out in our community and what can we do to help our community. And if Helping Hands, the Bread Line, whoever it is, if they can help our folks, then let's send them there and let them get the help, because it's about them, it's not about us.
Right.
And I think that's been a problem in the past, is that all the agencies kind of were in battle against each other. And I think that's kind of changing now, where the agencies are starting to work together. And my prayer is that it just keeps working that way.
Yeah.
I think we also need more bed space.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems with Helping Hands gets filled up. They start cramming everybody in because they're trying their best to make as much room for everybody that they possibly can, and then everybody gets jammed up, so people don't want to go out there and stay because now everybody feels jammed in.
Yeah.
So if we even had more temporary shelters for people to stay in, that would help. What that looks like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I just wish there was some way that could be arranged. Why people are waiting to get into the housing, because they got to have somewhere to stay between. Because even when we put them in rapid housing, it sounds like, well, rapid housing, it's going to be quick.
Yeah.
Well, it's 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's they still need somewhere to go during that transition time.
Right. Yeah, I know. That seems to always be the thing. I mean, it comes down to is housing. I think, didn't they try to open a shelter like on 11th Street or something, and then the community kind of shut it down?
Yes, they did, because they didn't want those kind of people in
backyard.
In their backyard. And being a father, having kids, I can understand their philosophy, what they're thinking of, because I do see some of the stuff that's happened. When I first started working at the mission, these guys down here, there would be cans of beer all over the place. There would be fights. We've cleaned that up a lot. We don't allow that kind of stuff down here. We're here to help people. We're not going to allow you to drink down here. We're not going to let you to do drugs down here. If you're fighting, you're getting kicked out of here. You're not going to get these privileges. These are privileges for you, and in order to get these privileges, you need to behave a certain way. And so most of the folks down here now have respected that. So people don't come by here now and see all these people out here partying. And so people didn't want the mission even here at that time because of that. Because what happens when people drink and drug a lot, they fight, and we have people start fighting out in the streets and everything like that. So they were afraid if a shelter was built in their area, that their kids were going to be in danger, that sex offenders were going to be moving in there. Well, what they don't understand is sex offenders aren't allowed to be in their buildings anyway, so they didn't even have to worry about the sex offenders. And so it was a fear, and that fear comes from a lack of knowledge. If they had more knowledge of what really goes on, then it wouldn't be so bad. And what happens is you'll hear that, let's say out at Helping Hands, somebody gets hit by a car, or there's a fight, or something happens. So there's one bad thing that happens, and that's all over the paper, and everybody hears about.
What you hear about is that, and not.
You don't hear about the 35 people that they've helped get in the housing, and all the people that are staying there and that are very comfortable and getting hot meals, and you don't hear about all that kind of stuff. You only hear about the negative side, and so that puts a bad reflection in the community eyes, because they only hear about the negative side, so that's what they think about.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole stigma with homelessness, I feel like. Mm-hmm. That's always what I try to explain to people, like, when I see people online and I hear people, there's this idea that homeless people are dangerous, they're drug addicts, they're mentally ill, and it's just like imagine going through the lowest point in your life and having to do that outside. Like, it's just, because a lot of people have mental breakdowns at some point, but usually it's within the confines of your own home or somewhere people can help you. But if you're homeless, you're having that mental breakdown in the street, and everyone can see it, and it's much, I don't know. But I think that's a really good point. If there's I think that kind of leads into the next question, where I was like gonna ask you pretty much if you could say something to people who kind of have that idea of what people experiencing homelessness are like. What would you tell them? I think you kind of already said that a little bit.
It's like the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Just because a person is homeless doesn't necessarily mean that person is an evil, bad person. Give the person a chance. You might be surprised what you'll find out. Well, I have been amazed at some of the people that most of our volunteers that we have here at the mission are our community members. They are the homeless people, and they are some of the hardest working people that I've ever seen in my life. Their problem is that they're on their addiction still, and so they can't hold a job because of that. They have a good work ethic, they're polite, they listen, but they just drink or drug too much. And so we try to give them that break. And so, but people on the outside won't give them that break. They just automatically look them as, well, they're a drunk, they're a loser. And that's not necessarily the case. They're homeless, look at the way that person's dressed. They don't deserve da-da-da-da-da. And that's not necessarily the case. Now, I'm not saying that every single solitary person that's homeless is going to be a great person, is a nice person, because there is some that aren't. But
Just like any group of large people.
But I would say people that are technically homeless are not violent, are not going to come up and stab you, are not going to come up there and rob you.
Yeah.
They're just in a bad situation. Most of them are either dealing with a mental health issue, alcohol, or drugs, or all three. Yeah. And they're stuck and they don't know how to deal with it, and they just need help and they don't know how to get it. Yeah. And so if we would stop looking at them as worthless and start looking at them as worthy and being able to help them, I think it would go a long way. The Bible talks about love others. If I tell people all the time, could you imagine what this world would be like if we did what the Bible said and love God and others the way we're supposed to? This world would be a whole different place, because the world is full of so much hatred, and we're looking for reasons to hate people. Yeah. And if I can sit here and look down on these guys, then I can put myself up a higher pedestal and say, well, look, I am not struggling with these problems, so I'm good, and so I don't have to worry about this. But look at these people down here, they're worth less. Yeah. And so I put myself up on that higher pedestal, and so I need to remove that. So just because people are on the street does not necessarily mean they're bad folks. Yeah. And we got to get that out of our mindset. Definitely. That everybody is bad.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything.
I'm a good talker.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Covered a lot of important stuff, especially about, I feel like part of the job of helping people who are homeless is trying to change that perception of them.
You're absolutely right.
It's like that homeless shelter that could have opened up, there'd be more services. So like you said, with even just like cleaning up what's going on outside here, I could see how that could help maybe more services get built somewhere else.
Yep.
If they see, it's not like
it worked over there, maybe it will work here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome, sir. I appreciate the fact that you are willing to do something.
Okay, that was the interview with Pastor Steve. I think there was a lot of very valuable information in there. I found it interesting what he was saying about Donny keeping his camp clean. Just saying he was kind of a leader. A lot of my interviews with him focused on some of the most difficult points in his life, and it's important to know who he was as a person. I remember when I first met him, he had a camp by the railroad tracks, and there was a couple other people camped with him there, and he made sure it was kept clean. He would warn people to move away when the trains came by. I think that was kind of his decision to camp there, because he knew that technically, being so close to the railroad tracks, it's railroad property, and the city police technically shouldn't have been able to kick him out, even though they kind of harassed him until he left. But anyways, yeah, he was kind of a leader like that. He took care of what he had, and he seemed to take care of the people around him. And when, just like when Pastor Steve talked about him coming and asking for a broom to clean up the camp, it didn't surprise me at all. Another thing I really wanted to hit on from that conversation is this idea of warming centers that we were talking about, and ways to prevent people dying from freezing to death, or trying to survive freezing to death. And usually the concept of harm reduction is only heard when talking about needle exchanges, the dispersal of Narcan, and things like safe injection sites, and which these are definitely very crucial parts of harm reduction. Another aspect of harm reduction is things like making sure people have someplace warm they can just exist. Pastor Steve was talking about the police station and the lobby where you could just sit, which is, and I've been in that lobby. It's very tiny. It would not be somewhere I would want to hang out at all. That's not, if you're homeless, you don't get along with the police. It's just how it is. Even if you're not actively using or anything, that's just like not somewhere I would ever go. I'd be like, yeah, okay, no. Yeah, so for a town like mine, Springfield, Illinois, it gets cold for a long time. It's important to make sure people have, if we can't have warming centers, I think just even if we did, making sure people have warm sleeping bags and tents that they can use is important. Because if housing isn't an option, and, if we're being honest, it usually isn't, or it takes a long time to get there, people are going to need supplies to stay warm and to survive winter. I think most communities could do better on this level. And, the sleeping bag tent combo can really help because it kind of gives you 2 layers, and the tent allows body heat to collect. It's kind of like a whole insulating factor. But, making sure that that's distributed, and, I think we could really use a program that just literally where there's money going to buying that stuff in bulk and just giving it away. Even something simple as a tarp can help protect against wet. If you have a sleeping bag and a tarp, I've wrapped myself up in that before if it's raining. But, honestly, what I would like to see would be something like a controlled camping area, a field or something, or an organized area even with small shelters available. I've seen this in these places in other cities, and they can be run in some very unsavory ways. But ideally, what you would have would be an area with small shed-like structures that you can sleep in, and a single small room with an electric heater, and that's really, and porta potties, a couple porta potties within that area, because it's if you can't build more housing, and even if you're putting money towards it, you're working on it, that's a long process for that to become available. And even when it is available, it's a long process to get people lined up to be able to get into the housing. So why not at least make sure people have the bare minimum they need? And I know this is easier said than done, and land is required for it, and then you have the people who are not in my backyard. But, we have to do more. And it can be considered a bad look when communities create areas like this. It's oh, well, that's not enough. That's not living space fit for a human. And, if we're not building more housing, like I said, even if we are, there has to be something done in the meantime to help mitigate these preventable deaths. And that can be done with cheap means, like getting people this gear that, can last them the whole winter. We live in a country of waste and abundance, and it's just not distributed effectively. And I really think having programs where we can just make sure if people are living outside, they have the gear they need. Like Steve was saying about the warming areas and how people still make their own choices, and there always will be people who want to be out on their own and who prefer it that way, and who can't or won't do shelters. And like Corey Beebe, who died from smoke inhalation, I talked to someone actually in local recovery here who helped him get a house at one point, and he said that Corey never really stayed there. He still spent most of his time outside because that's where he preferred to be. And, there's always going to be some people out there like that, some people who need their own space, their own areas, their own life, away from others where they don't feel controlled. And, let's just at least make sure these people have boots and gloves and sleeping bags. And that frostbite that Steve mentioned is brutal, like that one man cutting off his own toe. And harm reduction is making sure that stuff doesn't happen, which you can't obviously reduce all harm, but you can just mitigate this stuff. And you could say, well, I'm sure people will argue, well, they're just going to give it away or sell it or trade all the gear. But I feel like if you just flooded the community of people experiencing homelessness with gear, there would be more people would be likely to hold on to stuff they need to get through the winter. It's just all about helping one person at a time and doing it however you can. And keeping people warm is just as important as making sure Narcan is distributed and people know how to use it. But back to Donny. He was a victim of Purdue Pharma, and he kind of rode that first wave of the opioid epidemic, a victim of circumstance with the work injuries. And Donny himself recognized that, but he still never really blamed it all on circumstance. And addiction can be such a hard disease because it's so ingrained into your own actions, and it's seemingly perpetuated by your own personal choices, that it can be hard to see where the disease stops and the person begins. And I think Donny did recognize at some points that he didn't make the best choices. Talked even about before everything happened and he was always working, that he could have paid more attention to his family. And if you go back through those interviews and you hear him talk about his suicide attempt, you can really see the desperation he was feeling to escape this disease of addiction, of the situation it had got him in that he didn't know how to get out of. He didn't know how to escape, and he didn't know how to deal with any of that, or how to even get help. And I do think he was on his way to getting better. He talked about he knew the drugs weren't helping him, that they were, it was self-medication, but it wasn't. He was a smart guy, and it's just so hard because he was so close to being off the street. Really, it just sucks. But yeah, I want to play a short clip, very short clip from something that Steve said in our interview, directly followed by something Donny said in my last interview with him. So here is that.
We are going to go to bat for you. We will fight for you, and we will do everything in our power to get you from where you're at to get you where you want to be. You don't have to fight it alone. And that's one of the most important things, is to let them know that they do not have to fight this alone. They have people in their corner.
You still feel alone, and it's just like who you turn to for any information or any guidance, and trying to get you to take the right steps to better your life, and what channels there is out there available to do that. So that's really, really super important. It's one of the most important things there is, I believe, is being informed.
Yeah.
To have that contact with other people to be able to do that. That's definitely a big thing. It's just like it's for one thing, seeing that you're not alone. It's just like this isn't only you that's dealing with the situation. And I met some really good people out here that had a lot of hardship fall on them, and not by their own hands. They done everything.
I just feel that rings so true. Hearing it from both of them like that, you can just feel how important it is to know you're not alone, to be able to have that help. I think when it comes down to it on a very basic level, that is what it is all about. The stronger a community is, the stronger an individual's chance of survival will be within that community. And this is why, like when I said in the homeless sweep episode, the dispersal of camps, the dispersal of community. People go off on their own and they overdose and they die. So for so many reasons, we need areas where people can gather, access resources. And I'm very glad we have this local mission here and that they offer all these resources in the same place. And, I'm just really hope that we can see more acceptance for people experiencing homelessness, wider community locally here and everywhere. If people can accept these people, at least let them exist where they need to. If resources are expanded, the better chances they have of surviving, of recovering, of accessing housing. And maybe we need to create opportunities for community to hear from actual people out there on the streets. When it comes down to it, that's all I'm trying to do, really, is put these stories out there. Hopefully people can hear it from the people themselves, and it can change some people's minds about the way they think about homelessness. Obviously Donny dying has been hard on me, but I know he would want his story out there, even if this is what it has become. If it is come down to memories and clips of audio, at least there's something left. And there's obviously the lives he touched, and I think with this, it's just like there's something here to show that this man existed. He was a human being, he mattered, and he deserved better, just like so many other people. Yeah, so thank you for listening. I'm hoping that I will be able to sit down with his fiancée, Colleen, sometime soon to do an interview, or maybe more than one interview, and if so, I will make another episode to hear her part of all of this. I did meet her briefly the other day after interviewing Pastor Steve, and I know I'll be able to find her again in the mission. So if you want to support this podcast, you can do so by subscribing to it on your app of choice, sharing it with a friend, leaving a review. These all help. I'm still, just trying to get these out there to more and more people. I'm still trying to do at least one episode a month. I have gotten article that I pitched the story to the Illinois Times locally, and they accepted a story about Donny and everything that happened with him. So I'm sure I'll post a link to that on my Substack at some point. I am excited to be, getting some things done on a local level like that in a journalistic sense. Yeah, you could find a link to that on my Substack whenever that comes out, at roaddogs.substack.com, which that'll be in the show notes also. That's also where you can read about my own story being homeless across America and my journey with addiction and recovery. I also write about some just, it's not a political Substack, but sometimes, I just write about what's going on because I can't help it, and I'm a very opinionated person. But, music in this episode is by Luke Otwell. You can find him on Spotify as Luke Henry, and thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it, and more episodes soon.